We have thought for years and years and years that the church has a mission. The reality is God's mission has a church. So because we've been building our own kingdoms, it looks like something man built. And I want to say this to everybody that's going through a deconstruction period. I think you need to go through, because of the way things have been taught, particularly in the Western world, go through deconstruction, but don't stop there. Go forward to reconstruction.
Yes.
A bad experience somewhere is not a bad experience everywhere.
Welcome to Kingdom Over Everything. I am your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shae Bynes. And I have with me Dan Abraham Thomas Jr. He is the pastor at Find Your Place Church in Fort Worth, Texas, and also a leadership and mindset coach. We're going to definitely have to talk about that as well. But Dan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for saying my full government name. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm embracing all of my name. You know, the tribe of Dan got kicked out. Abraham, the father. Thomas, the doubter. I don't know what Junior means. That's just my family took that, and my family name is Jr.
Oh,
My
okay.
family name is so. You never hear anyone call me Dan in my family,
That's
unless they
interesting. I
unless
love
they
the
were
breakdown
joking.
of the meaning, but like that I didn't even catch that when I was, introducing you, but that's just the meaning of each and every name there, the intentionality there.
Yeah, I'm actually, I feel I'm in the father portion of, Abraham. He's a leader, of many nations. I believe that's where I am right now. That's where God
Yeah.
is developing me now. And I've embraced it because I think for a long time I thought my middle name was weird. So I'd make people, is it Antoine? Is it, is it all these other names? And then
Yeah.
finally, somewhere, I think in my mid 30s or something, I begin to say, I like my middle name, and I'm going
Yes.
through. And so recently, last year, instead of just Dan Thomas, I just put it out there. It's just Dan Abraham Thomas.
I love it. Okay, cool. So we met. The reason why we met actually is because there are a series of people who I know and love. I started to notice in my Facebook feed that there's folks were sharing. I would consistently see posts from a Dan Abraham Thomas Jr. in my
Right?
feed. And I'm just like, and at first it was just one person, then it was a second person, then it was a third and the fourth. And so it got to the point where I was seeing your posts like pretty much every other day. I would see something that you had said. And I'd be like, I don't know who that is, but I like what he's talking about. And so eventually, I reached out and I'm like, hey, let's talk. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but I want to get to know you. And so when we had our chat, Dan, there were so many things that came out of our conversation that I'm like, this will be really good to
Yeah.
explore, on Kingdom Over Everything. So I appreciate you joining me today and also looking forward to continuing, to get to know you. First of all, I want to talk about this because the church, Find Your Place Church, that's a new church.
Yeah.
So can we just first give a shout out to that? When did you launch Find Your Place?
Okay. So we launched Find Your Place on January 28th. So just 4 Sundays ago. So
Nice.
this church is a baby. It's an infant, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it because obviously, we obeyed God. But then I'm loving it because I'm in a place in my life where I'm more freer than I've ever been. I'm not
Yes.
bound by denomination. I'm not bound by some organization or some institutional something. What is on my heart, I can actually say, and
Yes.
I can actually get, people are free. And I didn't know that there were pockets of people here in Fort Worth and surrounding areas that they were yearning for this.
Mm,
Someone was asking me the other day because I have a friend in Los Angeles that launched 2 weeks before us, and they launched with like 200 and something people.
yeah.
And then of course now they've settled down to about 150, 175. And I said, man, hey man, what Los Angeles needed, you had. I'm
Yes.
not necessarily worried about because this is somewhat of an apostolic endeavor. I know I'm breaking new ground with the message,
Yes.
and his message is more hurting people, encouragement, those types of things like that. I've had to realize my calling, things will always start small, but then as I train people, it will get big. So I just have to be okay with that. And so
Yes.
it's been a wonderful thing. Now, you asked this, and I won't reveal any names, but I do feel more comfortable at this time, 4 years now, saying this. So how we even got to Texas from Oklahoma City, and
Yeah.
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, but we were coming down here to take over a church.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, the church in Oklahoma City, we had just started really getting traction. And I mean, things were going well. But at the same time, in the background, Shasa and I, my wife, we were thinking, maybe it's time for us to start training someone else to take this over. We had reached kind of the 8-year mark, and we were feeling that, and we wanted to be somewhere else other than Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my friends here, he calls me and he says, "Hey, I think that you'd be a good candidate to take over for my father." And I was like, "Wow, I listen." He says, "Hey, I'm not trying to say anything about your church. The name of that church was Chosen Generation Church." He said, "But just think about it." So we prayed about it. Shasta actually started looking up some schools in the area. She landed on the school where our daughter has been since we've been here. Make a long story short, that was in September of 2019. In November of 2019, we told our church that we were leaving. Subsequently, there were people who said, "Hey, let's go with them." Okay. We didn't force anyone. They said, "We're going where you go." And of course, my mom, we told her first on a Friday night so she wouldn't hear it the first time in church.
On that Sunday.
I know better than that.
Yeah, smart man.
I know better than that. And she says, "Well, you're not leaving me here," is what she said. And so time ensued. From that November and that December and that January, I was going down to preach at the church so people could kind of get used to me. Fast forward to May of 2020, I received notification that he was having second thoughts. Okay. And I was like, "Well, about what?" He says, "Well, I don't know. Maybe we need to go back to praying. I don't know how long the pandemic is going to last, these types of things." And my response was, "Well, God knew this was going to happen before anybody else did. So
Yes.
this has nothing to do with our agreement." Well, he kind of wanted to pull back. So I talked to my wife about it. Of course, she wasn't happy about it. And then I figured out that I probably needed to pull out of this,
Yeah.
or this was just going to just wreck my family.
Yes.
So my wife was disappointed. My daughter was severely disappointed. They both were crying.
Now
Even
you
my
hadn't moved yet, but you were in the preparations
we were
of moving, right?
Yeah, we were in the preparations of
Okay.
moving. Our house was on the market, and then my mom actually had already moved,
Wow.
and and two of our members had moved. One was on the way, and another one was on the way. And
Wow.
so all these things were in motion. And I had a friend who called me, who sometimes serves as a mentor, and he told me, he said, "Hey, Dan, I hate to tell you this. I know you're waiting on a call back from this pastor. I'm trying to tell you how things go. He's not going to call you back. You're going to have to end this." Now, I didn't want to do that
Right.
because it would be the final knife in,
Yes.
I didn't want to do that. Nail in the coffin. It'd be the final nail in the coffin. So anyway, we did it. Uh, I was surprised that the other side was surprised. I was like, you left me no choice. And then we had the decision of whether we were going to move to
Right.
Texas or not. Like, are we, because that was the main reason we were moving to Texas. And we actually prayed for about a day and a half, and God says, "You're going to Texas."
And that
And
was it. Not you're going to Texas and starting a
yep,
church, just you're
well,
going to Texas.
had no idea about a church at that time. Nothing.
Mhm.
It was so we just went. And here's the crazy thing. I gotta give you this,
Yes.
because I know sometimes when God tells you to do something and he doesn't tell you why, and
Mhm.
sometimes he doesn't even tell you where, it's the craziest thing that you've ever heard. And there's a tendency to say that's not God, or God wouldn't do
Yes.
something like that.
That's right.
So you have that tendency. And just so you know, people, preachers and pastors go through that too.
Yes.
It's everybody. But during that time, God said something to me that I'll never forget. It's a staple in my life. He told he told Abraham, he said, "Leave your family, leave your country, go to a land that I'll show you." Now, if it would have been me or you, Shae, we would have said, "What land?"
Yes. Yes.
Right? Like, because I got questions. That's the Thomas part of me, right? I got
I got
questions.
questions.
I
Yes.
got questions. And I think God would have replied to me and said, the land that I'll show you. In other words, I said what I said.
That's right. Go and then we'll talk.
Right. Yeah. I said what I said. Then for some reason, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It occurred to me that you can be in the will of God and not know where you're going.
Yes.
And all of a sudden a peace came over me. I remember we were trying to sell our house. Our house was shown 163 times in 60 days. And in the first 2 weeks, we had an offer, and for some reason they pulled out. And then after that, there was another offer. So now our house is on the market. It's been under contract twice. You know, that doesn't look good.
Right.
Our realtor at the time, she's telling us, and she was a good friend, and her husband was good friends with us, said, hey guys, you guys are going to have to bring the price of your house down. You won't make anything, but at least you won't have this hanging over your head. And we kept saying, no, this is not what God said. So
Yes.
imagine you're thinking you're going to Texas to get this church
Right.
that falls through the cracks, right? That's done. You're doing some contract work for a grace-based counseling agency that's paying you a little bit, but not enough. You still got a mortgage. And then all of this comes up, right? So all of this. So we're like, okay,
And people have moved. Like, let's not forget, people have completely transitioned to other cities in preparation.
My mom,
Your mom moved.
I'm having to talk to her, on phone. I can't go over the house no more. And actually, at the last 6 months before we left, she was living with us.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, God, I'm going. I'm doing what you tell me to do.
Yes.
This does not feel good.
Yeah.
This does not feel good. So I remember we were sitting in the parking lot of Main Event. We were going to go in. I said, we just need to blow off some steam. Let's just go have some fun. But my wife didn't want to go in. And I remember our realtor was like, hey, this is my expertise. Now, she's a believer too.
Yes.
And she's saying, hey, this is what you got to do. And we said, you know what? I know we have an open house on Sunday. We're just going to listen. Whatever happens, happens. But we're not bringing the price of the house down. She begged us. I said, nope, we're standing, like they say now, standing on business, right?
Yes.
This is what we're doing. So we went to church. I was serving as an interim executive pastor at the time, helping one of my friends out. He had asked me before I moved to help him out. And I remember they were sending us off that day. They had raised a little money. And he kept yelling during this prayer, the house is sold. The house is sold. The house is sold. We leave because later on that day, we've got some people coming to help us get stuff into the U-Haul, because this is how serious we were. We're leaving. Like we don't care. We are leaving.
Yes.
And we had found a place to stay. One of my friends from college, she let us stay with us for a while. She was going to let us stay with her for a few months. But anyway, we said we'll pay rent there and we'll pay mortgage here. Don't know where the money's coming from.
Right.
But God, you said.
You said.
That's where we were. So that's how serious we were about it. Well, we're getting ready to go to the U-Haul to pick it up. We're putting some gas in the car, and the U-Haul is right around the corner. And I hear the phone ring in the car. It's on Bluetooth, and I don't know what was said. I put the gas thing back in there, get in the car, and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" So our realtor was on the phone. She says, "You won't believe what happened." She says, "We had this open house, and 20 minutes before the open house closed, a woman came in and said, 'Hey, do you have any offers on the house yet?' She says, 'No.' She says, 'I like this house.' She says, 'But it will be for my mother.' She goes down the street, comes back with 10 or 5 minutes to spare before the open house closes. Her mother walks in and she says, this is the first thing she said. She said, 'Who lives here?' She said, 'Oh, it's a pastor and his wife. They're moving to Texas.' She said, 'I knew it had to be something.' She said, 'Because the minute I stepped in this house, I felt peace.'"
Come on.
I'm not making this up. This is no exaggeration. She said, "I felt peace."
I believe it.
And she says, "I'm actually buying this house for my grandson." She says, "How much are they asking for it?" And she told us, she says, "Okay, well, I want to buy it." She says, "Well, give me your realtor's information and we'll get with you on Monday." She says, "No, you're not understanding. I want to buy this house in cash."
Come on.
And she
Like,
said,
cancel the open house.
cancel the open house. She said, I want to buy this in cash. She
on.
said, well, you know that you don't have to pay the asking price. You can negotiate. Now, I don't know why my realtor was telling her that.
That's what I'm like.
I don't know why she was telling her that, but she
I
said,
was befuddled by this.
right. She says, "No, I'm going to pay what they asked for it."
Come on.
And so we went to California a few days after that to visit my wife's parents. We were able to get a notary there, and of course, it closed in like 10 days or something like that.
Come
But
on.
this is what God did, and we were able to make almost 10 grand from it.
Come on.
And she was telling us it didn't happen, and so that was the first real indication for us of,
Yes.
okay, you're supposed to move. And so we came, and for the first, few years, a couple years, I was, I wasn't very serious about my business. I was coaching folks, but I'd be doing it for free. I wasn't serious about it. Then I started charging some people. And then and business started picking up. I started investing in myself, spend a few $1,000s getting into courses. I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't normally say this, but the first year of my business, I made $42,000.
Right.
Wasn't bad.
Yeah. Not bad for a first year of business.
Kept us off the streets.
Yep.
But in ministry, and I didn't know this until we got with her, in ministry, I made over 69,000.
Right.
And so I remember I was getting ready to try to get a job. The lady that we were staying with, my college friend, she worked at Lockheed Martin. She's like,
Yeah.
hey, it'd be easy for you to get a job here. And so I said, well, let me pray about it. She was like, pray. I said, I got to pray about it. So I was doing morning prayer that next morning. I got up an hour before morning prayer. And I remember I was kneeling down on you right in front of this chair, and my knee barely touched the carpet. And I heard no.
Mm.
And I was like, I haven't even got started.
Uh-huh.
Well, what
Uh-huh.
do you mean no? And he said no. 2 days later, a friend from LA called me and said, hey man, this pandemic has really been getting to me. And he said, man, I just need some help. I know it's a lot to ask, but would you be willing to come down 2 Sundays a month? We'll pay for your plane ticket and stuff to preach for me, and you can stay with your in-laws. Man, I just need some help. And so from that time until the end of that year, like April, around Easter to the end of the year, that's what I did.
Oh,
Had
wow.
I taken that job, I
You
would have
wouldn't have been able to do that.
never been able to do that. And so I've been watching. We've been watching the Lord literally, and I don't use this word loosely, supernaturally
Yes.
provide for us the 4 years, well, almost 4 years. It'll be this summer that we've been here, and it all started. And here's the thing, because the Lord told me, he says, here's what I want you to do. I know that thing didn't work out for you at that church. I
Right.
know you're hurt. I know you want to say something. He said, don't you say anything.
Uh-huh.
He said to anybody, don't you say anything online. Don't
Yes.
you try to sneak say it, be subliminal, all that. I don't want you to say nothing.
No vague booking.
Yep. He said, I went to, and prior to that, I was at a conference in Chicago, and the gentleman had prophesied to me, and he said, hey, there's going to be like an auction in your life, and God's going to watch how you handle a betrayal to
Oh, wow.
determine what was next. Now, that was this situation. I didn't know that. And so God allowed me and his son to maintain relationship.
Yes.
His son is now the pastor. He came back home. There were some things that happened to them in their relationship, to where he was supposed to have taken over. He was supposed to have taken over twice before, and his father
Wow.
reneged on him. So there was a little bit of
Wow.
a pattern there. And God says, what if I told you? And this is what the Lord said to my heart one day, because I was still like hurt,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
necessarily angry, right?
Yes.
About a year after or so, he said, what if I told you that I used you to build a bridge between the son and the father?
Come on. It's just, and he would do something like that because he's just that good.
He's just that good. And he said, and then he says, use it to test and develop you. He said, what I have for you. And of
Come on
course,
now.
we're still waiting on the balance of it. He said, what I have for you, no one will be able to say, I gave this to Dan. It was because of this. He said, you watch and you wait. And so
Yes.
with the culmination of the church and everything, we know we're going to see this whole thing come together. And
Yes.
then, the Dr. Tony Robinson, right?
Yes. Yes. Love her to pieces. One of my favorite people in the world.
The Dr. Tony Robinson, she gave me a word, and it was so great. She said, this is the year of the turnaround for you.
Mm.
And she says, and then years 24 through 26 are going to be breakthrough years for you. And I remember when she said that, God says, I'm going to use this time
Yes.
because you were faithful to what I told you to do. I'm going to use this time to erase everything that happened. And so we've been just faithful in waiting and
Yes.
not looking, not despising the day of small beginnings.
That's right.
One thing I want to give a real quick shout out.
Yeah.
Me and my wife, we just earlier this month we hit 18 years. 18 years, 18,
Congrats.
18 years of marriage.
Yes.
And in terms of my ministry and where the Lord is saying, hey, Dan, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. What the Lord said. I've never had one issue, one challenge from my wife about what God was telling us to do or telling me to do to lead
Yes.
them as a family. She's been the biggest and the best supporter. And I've told her this before, but sometimes when you go through things, it'll cause you to look back
Sure.
and see who's really been with you the
Yes.
entire time. And every time she says, if this is what the Lord said, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. And I'm like, well,
And that's a gift.
when we moved from from California to Oklahoma, moving from Oklahoma to Texas, just like "Hey, this is what the Lord is saying. And she's been on board, sometimes even more excited than me
Yes.
about it. So I have that, and I love that we can go forward together. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's been some the biggest changes in my life, but also this has been, I can say, the biggest growth period
Yes. That's so
in,
good.
in my life. And so God has really, really, really been good. And I know this sounds cliche, but if anyone is going through anything where you can't see the direction, you don't know what's going on, I always say God is doing more behind your back than he is in front of your face anyway.
Yes.
But I would just say this to you: just trust God.
Yes. Yes.
You don't have to know.
That's right. That's right.
And it's never for you to know how, because if I know how, that would somehow take his glory.
Yes. So I want to talk about something that I think you might have mentioned this when we were chatting before I hit record, and I want to dig into it a little bit more.
Okay.
You had talked about how one of the things is like right now, you're like, I understand that the thing that I'm called to here, it's apostolic in nature. It's like really developing. It'll start small, it multiplies, and all of that. But something you said to me, I think before we hit record, was you were talking about the message that you carry
Mm,
specifically in the body of Christ, that the area that you are in, there's also the dynamic of like kind of shaking up some stuff because it's different than perhaps the prevailing
mm.
messages around, whether it's theology, doctrines, or whatever in your space. So I want to talk a little bit about, there's two things I want to talk about. One, I want to kind of talk about a little bit around your own trajectory of coming into kingdom revelation, and I also want to talk about and you can pick which one you want to talk about first, but I also want to talk about how you feel apostolically walking into a new area with a message that's like, pretty different from what the other folks in Fort Worth might be talking about. So take your pick, which direction you want to start with first. But I want to talk about that because there is a lot of kind of untangling around doctrine. Even you've talked about even in your own journey with doctrine and not having, you're free now and all of that. So take it whichever way you want to go, Pastor Dan.
All right. So let's start off with a little comedy here. I'm
Okay.
gonna I'm gonna ask you a question.
Yes.
Okay. Do you wear jeans?
Yes, I'm wearing some now.
Okay. If you had met me, I'm 45 now. If you had met me at the age 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, you'd be on your way to hell. Straight up. I mean, straight up, George Bush gasoline draws on.
Oh my gosh.
Do not stop at go, just straight up, because that's the way I was raised. That's what I believed.
Yes.
And the crazy thing about that is that you talked about you asked the question, how did I come into this? So let's
Yes.
start there. But I'll make it really quick for the sake of time. I was an apologist for my Pentecostal denomination. I grew up, classical Pentecostal, and I believed it, and I was a faithful adherent to it. Even going to a historically black college and university, most people don't know I was a virgin until I was 27 when I was married.
Oh wow.
So I really, like, I was walking it, at least the big
Yes.
stuff, right? I was doing it,
Yes.
and I was still cool. I was student government president in college.
Yeah.
I was the president of the honor society, whatever they called it, the honors club.
Yep.
So I did all that stuff. So I did a lot of things, but had a lot of respect from people. But at the time, I didn't know there was religious pride there too, because you look at people and you're condescending. I remember one instance. There was a lady I went to high school with, and she had went her first year. She went to my college, and so we were sitting outside, and she was asking me about what I thought about her going to the party that
Okay.
night. And so it kind of felt to me like a challenge, right? It just what it felt like to me. And I
Right.
told her, I rose up. I said, "Well, the Bible says,
Uh-huh.
love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in you." And she said, I'll never forget this. Her countenance drooped. She was like, "Are you saying I don't love God?" And I remember my response. I said, "No, He said it."
Wow.
And so, and in my mind, the blood has been washed from my hands. I'm good. And I remember in my mind walking away, I was like, "Got her." You know, this was the mindset,
Yes.
and I didn't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
Fast forward a couple of years later, maybe the end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year. I remember I went to church one day, and my friend who normally runs the sound system, we preached our first sermon on the same night. He was going on vacation with his family, so I'm running the soundboard. They say any good preacher worth his salt knows how to work a soundboard.
I didn't
At
know
least,
that, but now I know.
right. At least that's what my father in the ministry told me. So I'm working the soundboard, everything's going fine. And then all of a sudden, just like you and I are talking now, we're giving and receiving messages. When you would talk, I would hear what you say. I would understand the messages that you're saying. Like I've heard these words before, but for some reason, when it got to my ears, it got scrambled
Mm.
and I had no understanding. And I remember going home where I was washing my clothes at my mom's house before I went back to school. And she was like, "Well, was he using big words?" I said, "No, you don't understand." When his words got to my ears, I couldn't understand it. It happened the next Sunday. I remember rushing to the bathroom and I said, "This is what happens to people when they go crazy." This is what I'm thinking. I said, "This is crazy." That third Sunday, my friend was back. It happened again. I'm sitting in the front row. I didn't even wait. I just left church. I'd never done that before. I left. I'm like, "What is going on?" And I remember grabbing my stuff, getting ready to drive back to school. And I used to listen to 800 AM. They're part of the Cumulus Network. And I remember Charles Stanley was on.
Mm.
And it was a message he was preaching about the wonders of grace.
Yes.
And I remember driving and hearing what he was saying. And he said, I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Did you know that there's more grace in God than there is sin in you?"
Mm.
I said, "What?" And
Mm.
at first it offended me. And then he continued with, he said, "There's more grace." He said, "You can't out sin the grace of God."
Come
He
on.
said, he's pursuing you more than you're pursuing him. I
Yes.
remember pulling the car over to the side of the road and I just started bawling. I
Wow.
don't know what it just, those 3 weeks, it just hit me. It hit me. It was a supernatural thing.
Yes.
And I remember going back to the school and I opened up the Bible and I was just reading in Romans where he was coming from. And it was like I'd never read before.
Yeah.
And I stayed up reading all night till like 3 or 4 o'clock. It was crazy. That night I had a spiral notebook I hadn't used. I wrote down 22 questions. And I said, "I'm going to ask my pastor about this. This is great." Like I had no idea that this was against our doctrine. I said, "This is great." I went and I waited till after service and I asked him. And after I asked the first question, I never forget. Sometimes his glasses kind of used to tip like this over his nose. And he looked at me and he said, "Where did I go wrong with you?"
Where did I go wrong with you, bro?
He kind of talked with a dark whisper, right? So I just wanted to put that on it. And
Right.
so I'm sitting here and I'm so hungry for whatever just happened to me. For
Yes.
truth, it didn't even offend me. I said, "Oh, I got another question," and I just start going. I just
I
start
got I
going.
got 22 here.
I got
Number 2.
22, and I remember him saying, "Hey, we'll talk about this next week." It was too much for him, but that's where it started. God, like
Yes.
he supernaturally pulled me out of that.
Mhm.
Had he not, I would, because I was such an apologist for it. And
Yes.
then even people who didn't believe like I believed, I was so good, you'd be convinced that what I was saying was true.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so God just began to teach me. And at the time, of course, no one I knew.
Right. No one was teaching. You had to go to the ultimate teacher.
Yep, had to go to the ultimate teacher. And then of course, so my me and Dub have talked about this. Like, he started out with the kingdom,
Yes.
right? And then had to learn grace on the back end.
Right.
I started out with
With grace.
grace and new covenant.
Yes.
And then in their spurt, somewhere in the middle of those, I started doing kingdom, reading Miles Monroe's books. But I
Yeah.
started, like, I was on a search. I started getting, there were people who wrote books who were from Russia,
Yeah.
from Ukraine. Like, I was
Mhm.
searching every nook and cranny of the internet, and it
Yes.
was just amazing stuff. And so when I started, quote unquote, coming on the scene, when I fully jumped into the water and said, okay, I'm not looking back, and this was in
Yes.
2004.
Yes.
This was in 2 years after I arrived in California. I said, no, this is it. This is the gospel. I People were like, where are you coming from? My wife testifies to this. She didn't tell me until years later. She said, what is wrong with this boy?
She's like, "Did my husband become a heretic?
Yeah,
What happened?"
because she was raised in the Baptist church, but watch this, in a Southern Baptist church,
Ah,
a
okay.
Black Southern Baptist church in California. So, basically good word, but
Yes.
not this,
Yeah.
not this. And so but she started getting impacted by the gospel, because I began to change in certain ways
Yes.
concerning her, and even in our marriage, not just
Yes.
talking about it, but living it, and then
Come
how
on.
we were raising our daughter. And so I thought that the Baptist church believed in grace.
Right.
My preaching assignments at my own church began to dwindle.
Uh-huh.
They began to dwindle, and I would
This
go,
is
and then
funny.
sometimes I would get invites in LA, and they would know what I was preaching. They said, I just want to hear where he's coming from. And I had a lot of pastors tell me, I believe in what you're preaching. I just can't do it. I'd lose my church. That's what they would tell me.
I
And I
would
was like,
lose
man,
my church.
yeah,
Wow.
that's what they would say. I said, listen,
Wow.
man, you're losing your life, and they're losing the life they could have,
Come on.
because it's a performance driven system.
Yes. Come on.
And
Yes.
and you
Yes.
got to get out of that. And so I've always been a truth seeker. If even if it costs me friendships, which it did,
Yeah.
it cost me friendships. I had one guy tell me, he says, people can go to hell faster in your church than being outside of church. That's,
Wow.
he said, I'll never invite, and people are serious when they use certain words. He says, I'll never darken the door of your church again. They real serious when they start talking like that. And
Wow.
so, and I told him, I said, thank you. I said, because this is the kind of response that Paul got when he
Yes.
started preaching it. That's how I know. I wouldn't have known that I was preaching the right thing until you started saying stuff like that.
Yes.
So you asked me another question. I've been gifted, I think, with a little bit of divine indifference. Right.
I love this.
So, and I think for two reasons.
Okay.
One is because I'm not aware of what's
Yes.
going on or what other
Right.
people are saying.
Because
And
you're
then
focused in.
I'm so focused that by the time the negativity gets to me, I've already accomplished what I need to accomplish.
Okay. That's fair.
Or it's because I really don't care.
Yes.
I
Yes.
really, don't. I've and I probably learned this more from my mom and just observing my mom and just being in the house. Like those things, if I stop because you started something, like
Yes.
me and my wife were having a discussion the other day. There was something going on at our job, and she was like, well, now I'm gonna do this because they did this. I said, well, then they won,
Yeah.
because they changed you. And the only change I'm looking for. So I had a person tell me, they've been coming to our church. They said, don't you know that you're in the Bible Belt? That this message, especially how conservative Texas is, and
Right.
then they take that conservative view to their religion. Listen, bro, you're gonna get thrown out before you can even go in.
Right.
And I said, I haven't felt any of that, because I'm only focused on the people who really want the message. And I said, I'm
Yes.
telling you that there's a ground swelling
Yes.
here. One of the things I noticed in terms of the region, So I think this is in Ephesians 3, but it says that the manifold wisdom of God must be made known by the church to the principalities and powers. And
Yes.
then it struck me that in order for something to be made known by the church, it first has to be made known to the church. And in this
Well,
region, come on,
well,
in this region, the church
yes.
doesn't know it.
That's
They,
good.
they,
That's
they,
good. I'm curious,
yeah.
you know, there's so much conversation. I don't know when these conversations started, but you're talking about groundswells. There's been a groundswell of conversation around deconstruction. There's so many
Yeah.
folks that are leaving the church. There's entire like generations of people that are abandoning the church. Some of them are finding their way. They're like, okay, I'm just getting away. I still love Jesus and I want to figure out my way back. So they're like the deconstructing that leads to reconstruction. Then some are just like, listen, I'm over this. This was all wrong. I don't like y'all Christians. Don't act like Christians. I'm kind of over this. This isn't even real to me anymore. And they're completely abandoned. They're like deconstructing to just another thing, right? I'm curious whether the Lord's given you any sense of whether even or just your thoughts around this, whether this message of grace, this message of the kingdom, that these are like core things that draw people in who are deconstructing in a process of deconstruction for them to be able to, in a healthy way, to reconstruct and find their identity in him and be able to kind of be free from a lot of the things that the tradition, the doctrines, and the hypocritical things they experienced or whatever. What's your view about that?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that question because one of the things we have to understand is we have thought for years and years and years that the church has a mission. The reality is God's mission has a church.
Mm,
So because we've been building our own kingdoms, it looks like something man built. And I want to say this to everybody that's going through a deconstruction period. I think you need to go through because of the way things have been taught, particularly in the Western world. And that's a whole
yes.
nother conversation.
Yes.
But yes, go through deconstruction, but don't stop there. Go forward to reconstruction.
Yes.
So let God tear down all that is not him and then let you be built up in him, your identity in him. One of the things that I've always said about this, especially when it started happening to me, and I kept, because there wasn't a whole lot of people
Yeah.
to even advocate what I was doing. I kept a lot of this on the inside. So now it's just out. So you've
Yeah.
got the nuns and you've got the duns, right?
Yes. Oh, that's good. The nuns and the dons. Yeah.
You got the nuns.
Yeah.
We never wanted to be a part of that. And then you got the people who are done with that. But this is when I want to say to the people who are going through deconstruction. A bad experience somewhere is not a bad experience everywhere.
Yeah.
And one of the things we have to be careful of is becoming uh, uh, either or people instead of both and.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more balanced on the both and side. I know that there were some structural things that happened to you, and you said, "Okay, I'm in part of this system." But it may have just been a person in a church who didn't know conflict resolution that well. Like I know I've always told people this, that conflict in church is an opportunity to release unconditional love. We don't understand that. We don't understand that. So when people were like, "Are you going to pastor?" I was talking. There's a 65-year-old Caucasian lady that comes to our church. Love her to death. She's in the tacos group. That's how she met me. She's not only wise because of her years, but she's just, you can tell she's full of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And she said, "I just don't want to do." She went to this huge church in Dallas. I won't name it, but she says, I'm just tired of that system. I said, "But listen, are you prepared for the construction of a new system that the Lord is doing that will look like his church and won't look like something that's ran or built by man?" I said, now we can say, "I don't want any part of that." That's fine. But understand there's still good there.
Yes.
And then we can make it even better.
Yeah.
We can look at the things, because this is the mistake I made. When I first started pastoring in Oklahoma City, I so didn't want to be like those people because, again, I had come out of all of that.
Right.
I was out of, this was 2012. I'm now back in Oklahoma City from California. I'm going to get as far away from that stuff as I can.
Mm-hmm.
You know what happened when I did that? All those things, all the things I wanted to get away from, granted, they were not in our church, right?
Right.
But you know what also wasn't in our church? honor,
Mm,
right? So people were not honoring each other.
yeah.
People were not preferring each other above one another. You lost some of your decency, right?
Yeah.
Because, and we're not talking about status or because a person has this position. I'm just talking about people were condescending when we
Sure.
took every single thing away.
Yeah.
We took every single thing away, and then we were left with no structure. I said, so there's no possibility that you can be in anything, even if you got a home group and it's 20 people coming. You got to have some structure at some point.
Yes. Yes.
We just got to learn how to not lord over people, right? And we also have to learn that this is not ours.
Yes.
This doesn't belong to us. I think that sometimes even the preachers, we forget that this message was given to you through you for other people.
Yes.
It's so critical. So like when I hear people going through deconstruction of doctrine, I say stay with the main elements, because unfortunately in the African American experience, people are not just going away from church, they're going to other things.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
Yeah, very true.
I gotta burn sage. I gotta have a
Yep.
crystal under my bed or my
Yes.
pillow and all these different kinds of things. And my thing is that okay, you were never or never had the opportunity to be rooted and grounded,
Yes.
and you maybe have been rooted and grounded in experience. My church was very experiential. I'm not saying there wasn't good preaching, because
Right.
I'm a product of my father in the ministry. He was one of those. He was one of those Church of God in Christ preachers that was respected by Baptist preachers.
Yeah.
But I have to say that when I got to California and I went to that church, God took that opportunity to marry the spirit and the word together. I began to have actual balance,
Yes.
begin to have balance. And I never had that before. And then from that, I realized that there was a teacher in me. So anybody that's on that deconstruction path, I'm not telling you to go back.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you to do any of that. I'm just saying follow Jesus and watch this. Don't become a gracist.
What do you mean by that?
So a gracist is somebody who has been raptured by grace, consumed and overwhelmed by grace, now begins to condemn the people, right? Who are like they used to be,
Oh, that's good. That's
right?
good.
Because and this is something else I've noticed about, and of course you've got the God gave it as grace over grind, but you've
Yes.
got the people who believe in grace, have accepted the kingdom, accepted the new covenant, but then they just roll in the tulips of he loves me, he loves me, he loves me, he loves me, he loves
Yes.
me, he loves me, he loves me, and then you never express or demonstrate sonship,
Yes.
which now gets into responsibility and
That's right.
accountability. And then you get lazy. They said, well, I've got everything. Yes, you do. But Paul said, I count myself not to have apprehended. But
Yes.
this one thing I do, I press. You're not pressing to catch him. You're pressing to be made more aware of what you don't know. He knows all about you. You don't know all about him.
Come on.
That's the pursuit to get into the greater. And so sometimes when we get into this, grace Christians, they get lazy.
Yes.
They get lazy. So now, because they found out I don't have to pray, I don't have to do this. Oh, I don't do anything at all.
Right. As allowing love and identity to compel you. That's why
Yes.
so when I talk about grace, it's when people talk about how grace is his unmerited favor. I'm like, it is, but it's also a divine enablement. It's like to
Ah,
be who you're called to be, to do what you're called to do that comes from your being. So it's like it's enabling you to be and to do. It's
and
not just his unmerited favor.
right. Just again, rolling in the tulips.
Yes.
And I know this is not in the Bible, but I asked God to give me like, okay, what are like some stages of grace? So
Okay.
first we come into covering grace.
Okay.
Then we come into sustaining grace. Then we come into empowering grace, like you said.
That's
And
not
then
grace over
finally,
grind, right?
right, that's that grace over ground. Then you've got overcoming grace.
Mm,
And
I
so,
like it.
and so the thing about it is, I've told people this, and this is where we get into how I coach,
Yes.
because there's a way that God has made us physiologically, right? There's a way that He's made us so that so here it is. You've got a belief system that was stamped and cemented somewhere between the ages of 0 to 7.
Right.
All this information was coming into your nervous system, and it developed a belief system, which is just a conglomeration of thoughts. Like when the Bible says that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. you look up that word strongholds, it tells you that it is a fortress against another
Yeah.
one's opinion.
Yes.
We,
Yes.
we've all had somebody we can't convince them. They just hard headed, right? They're just
Yes.
hard headed. So you've got a belief system that informs about 80% of your thoughts. So belief systems produce thoughts. Thoughts produce emotions. You've never had a thought that was not uh, followed by an emotion. If I told you to think about somebody you don't like, immediately you're going to have an emotion about it.
Yes.
Then those emotions produce behaviors. Those behaviors produce results and experiences. That's how you're made, because God made you a believing being, meaning that what you believe actually is the experience that you're going to have in life.
Yes.
Now, to the point that a lie believed as truth will operate in your life as truth, even though it's a lie.
Mm.
That's how
Wait, say that
powerful.
again. Say it again for the people who didn't hear you say it the first time.
Yes, a lie believed as truth will operate in your life as truth, even though it's a lie,
It's good.
because you believe it. And so we've got some unbelieving believers.
Yeah.
And one of the things I teach my clients is that, listen, you don't see with your eyes, you see through your eyes.
Mm.
In other words, your eyes see what your mind believes.
Yes. Yes.
Like this is the whole kit and caboodle of it
Yes.
all. Me understanding that helped me understand the Bible better. It helped me understand how to help people better. You
Yes.
don't have a behavior problem, you've got a believing problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
First of all, I love that I'm experiencing from you just in this one conversation. I'm getting to experience the pastor in you, the
Mm.
teacher in you, and the coach in you. And I think this is fun. And what I
Yeah.
also love about the fact that so there's people who are pastor that I call the bleeding heart pastor, but because of your coach side, you have like this no nonsense. I'm with you for the long haul, and I've got like and I can walk with you in a process, but that no nonsense coach is like, but you gonna grow, like you gonna grow.
Right.
You remind me of my husband. It's like you've got pastoral, but that coach or that teacher in you, it's like it's gonna be like, come
Yeah,
on, we're not gonna
that's
stay
why
the same.
I'm
I love
looking.
it.
I'm pastor now. You're so right. I'm looking because I've changed. I'm looking for a pastor
Yes.
real quick. I'll apostolically lead, but y'all better get somebody in here with a
Who can
staff
do that?
that can follow you, because that
Ron's
ain't
like,
me
I
no
need
more.
some. I need a little bit of bleeding heart around here so
Yep.
that I can be apostolic.
Yep. Exactly. And I formerly I wouldn't have recognized it.
Right. Right.
I need somebody that can feel,
Yes.
and so because there's no short of inboxes and stuff I get each week. Hey, people just call me PD for short,
Yeah.
Pastor Dan. Hey, help me with this, help me with this, and help me with this. But this is why we're going through a series right now called The Heir Up There.
Okay.
Okay. And so we're co-heirs, joint heirs with Christ, but no one has taught this. I've told someone, if you look at the book of Ephesians, you're going to find out that there are themes in it, and they all start with the W: the wealth, the worth, the walk, the worship, and the warfare of the believer. Those 5 things. And now you'll find out in the warfare of the believer, the war is over.
Mm.
But that's a whole different
You're gonna have to
conversation.
give me the links. I'm gonna link up your sermons. You're gonna have to tell me where they are so we can link them
Yeah.
up so folks can like dig into
Yeah,
this
we're gonna start
series.
recording like for audio this Sunday. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to get the room ready. There's some things that, yeah, I'm still trying to get the room ready. But I tell people, you got to see yourself as an heir,
Yeah.
high above all principalities, high above all powers, and all those different things. You got to see
Yes.
yourself as that. I don't have to get the devil under my feet. He's
Yes.
already under my feet.
Already there.
I don't have to go and I'm going back to the devil's camp to get what he stole from me. You don't have to do that. There is no camp. he's been and he doesn't have a
Oh
kingdom
Lord.
anymore. If anybody understands military warfare, when you cut off the head of the snake and you destroy the enemy, sometimes there are little remnants,
Yeah.
but he doesn't have any organized kingdom. Sometimes I think it's like almost like Jesus didn't even raise from the dead. We don't like there everything changed after that. And
Yes.
so I've just been teaching that you're an heir, heirs have an inheritance, an inheritance is not something that you work for. It's something someone else worked for, died, and left to you. Which is why I tell people in terms of when the Bible talks about, effeminate people, liars, it goes through that whole ugly
Right.
list of people will not inherit the kingdom of God. And people say, see, right there, it tells you those people are not going to heaven. I said, come on, let's think. Let's put on our thinking caps, which is what one of my goals to help Christians not put their brain at the door, but keep your brain in your head when you go into church.
I
You
love
can't inherit something after you die. You inherit something because somebody else died.
that.
This is not talking about heaven. These are people. What is the kingdom of God? It's righteousness, joy, and peace.
Peace.
They forfeit the benefits of righteousness, joy, and peace if you continue in those lifestyles. Has nothing to do with heaven. I,
Ooh-wee.
I know. So it was for me. It's been this journey. It almost feels like, Shae. It almost feels like this. It's like I was another person
Yeah.
who lived another life.
Yes.
I can't even believe that I came from that
Yeah.
because this side is so much better. And this side is so much better when everything is going my way.
Yes.
This side is so much better when everything is not going my
That's
way
it.
because facts change.
Yes.
Truth is original information.
Yes, that's so good. I feel so much of that myself too, because even though I didn't grow up in churches, I didn't have to untangle from a lot of tradition,
Mm,
doctrine, and stuff. Because it was kind of I don't I don't know what you want to say. I'll just say it was unencumbered, but it was also kind of shallow, in
mm,
terms of some of the things. So the gift of that was that there wasn't a lot to untangle from, but yet still, I can still say that it is light years better
mm.
on the side of walking into revelation of the gospel of the kingdom and walking with Jesus, doing the with God life by the power of his grace, than
Wow.
it was doing the other thing. Even if I didn't have to untangle from a bunch of stuff, some of that stuff's still in you because you're still focused on yourself, motivated by what you can do, and you're still kind of just like centered in that achievement, performance, striving type of thing. And so
Yes.
even if you didn't have to untangle from like, oh, you're going to go to hell with this, and if you don't do this isn't holy, you can't wear your jeans. I didn't go through any of that, but there was still that dependence on yourself,
Ah,
that life, whether things are going well or not going well in the kingdom, it's so much, it's like it's indescribably better. So I,
yes.
I feel you on that. So I'm saying that for the people who are just like, oh, well, I don't have the testimony of X, Y, and Z. It's still so much
But it's built into the world also. We live in a meritocracy. We do. At every job you go to, you have performance reviews.
everywhere you go.
It's built into the whole system of humanity.
Yes,
And I love what Eugene Patterson says in the message from Matthew 11:28 through 30.
it's my
He
favorite.
says, when we know it as, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He says, come with me and learn the unforced
Unforced
rhythms
rhythms
of
of
grace.
grace. Yes, yes.
Unforced. I'll go ahead and tell you this. It's out now, but because I got my designer working on it now. So we're doing a rock with you Easter.
Okay.
I got this is the vision that the Lord gave me, and I know for some people it's gonna be like you really say that, but I'm driving down the street, and every now and again, as a quasi musician, songs come to my head, and I just start singing. I wanna rock with you all night, dance you in today, right?
Mhm.
So the Lord began to say to me, He said, "Isn't that what I want to do with you?"
I
He
love
said,
it.
did I not dance you into sunlight, brought
Yes.
you out of darkness into the marvelous light? He said, that's what I want to do with you. And then I remembered that there's this thing called perichoresis, which is the eternal dance, right?
Yes.
And he said, and we've been invited into that, and people don't know that God, He wants to rock with you.
Come on.
And so that's what we're basing. It's that chorus and then one verse of Mike's song that we're basing all of Easter on. So that's going to be
Oh,
fun.
that's gonna be so much fun. Oh my gosh, Dan! Now I can call you PD. PD.
Yep. Yeah.
This was rich. What a great conversation. I'm
Yes.
glad that you came and that we got to explore so much goodness
Yep.
in this conversation. So I appreciate you coming. Where do people go? Like, what's the website for your church, or how do people connect with you? Where do they go?
Okay, the website for our church is fypchurch.com. You can find me on social media, Facebook, Dan A. Thomas Jr., or just look for Dan Abraham Thomas. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one. And then also Dan A. Thomas Jr., all one word, on not only on Instagram, but also on TikTok if you're a TikToker at all. I'm there, and that's where you can find me.
I love it. And when you go, you can expect what you got here. You're gonna get some mic drop moments, and they're always in truth. You'll get some disruptions. They'll disrupt you a little bit, might even agitate you a little bit, but the grace that you carry and when you do it is really great. And so I encourage you all to connect with Dan. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. This has been so wonderful. And then I've got to get you to meet my wife, because I told you she thinks you're big stuff, and you are. When she found out about this interview, she said, Shae Bynes. That's the way she looked at me when she did it. And so thank you so much for allowing me to be here.